I think Lyndon B. Johnson said it the best, which, this guy being a Southerner, he pretty much summed up America's race issue as if you can make the poorest white man think he's better than the best black man, he'll empty his own pockets for you.
What's up, peoples? It's your bartenders, Mr. Z.
And your boy, Omega.
With the recent rise in awareness surrounding Asian American and Pacific Islander violence, we felt it was important to give voice and space for those who are directly affected by this, educate the unconscious biases that exist, as well as derive some much-needed solutions to an outstanding problem. As every episode, we want to thank all of you for listening. We truly appreciate you listening to our hearts and minds on varied and difficult topics.
Special thank you goes out to our Patreon subscribers for their support of the show. Every little bit helps us reach our goals to invite more high-profile guests and create bonus content.
And if you want to join in our conversation outside of this cast, feel free to hit us up on Twitter or Instagram at HaveADrinkCast, and make sure to use that hashtag HADcast.
Remember, this is always a conversation. If you don't agree, you want to voice your opinions, or even suggest a topic for an episode, feel free to join our Discord as well. The link will be in the description.
And please, if you like what we're doing here, share us with your friends, your family, your neighbors. Ooh, create a video game where you're able to share your hearts and minds and give much needed space for your feelings. Your referrals mean a lot to us, as that's how we gain more listeners. So,
thank you again.
And get prepared to sit,
think,
and have a drink.
Welcome to Have a Drink Podcast. Enjoy the episode.
We said peace. What's up, peoples, and welcome back to another episode of the Have a Drink Podcast, where we invite you to sit, think, and have a drink. We're your bartenders, Mr. Z.
And I'm your boy, Omega.
Hey.
Yes, and we have some lovely special guests this evening. This is my really good friend that became family. This is Sammy 2 right here.
Hello, everybody.
He is a Santa Clara native and engineer, and he's also one of my really good martial arts friends that I've traveled all over the world with, and I trust him with almost anything.
Beautiful.
Almost. All right.
And above us in the center panel, we have Stephanie. She's a second generation Asian American. She identifies as both Vietnamese and Chinese, and born and raised in the Bay Area. So, hey, pedestrian. She's also a AAPI, young Asian professional, supporting a few Silicon Valley tech companies. When she's not playing with her fur baby Kenji, she's working out or binging on Netflix. K-dramas are her guilty pleasure.
And next we have Maria, and she is a Bay Area native, immigrant from Taiwan. She spends her time working as a partner-level litigation attorney in a law firm specializing in common interest developments. She enjoys running outside, seeing new places, and learning about new foods. And we also went to high school together. Yeah! See, I graduated. And Abbie, man, Abbie literally has a book for her for her bio. But I'm going to say this. Abbie is one of the coolest, greatest, and most special people that you could ever meet. She is very talented. She works in hospitality management industry for over 13 years. She is involved with so many different things, from GLAD, from the dance community, just so many areas. And I'm trying to tell you right now, she is what a treat to have. So please welcome our special guests, Abbie, Stephanie, Maria, and Sammy. Yeah.
Hey, and again at the bar, we also have ZorDonofDoom, also known as Zoreen. Hey, give it up, big ups. Pew, 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 pew. We're very thankful to have you all on, because it's Super important, especially in these times, to be able to give platforms, to give voice, to give attention towards the things that truly matter. I mean, we experienced things that happened last summer. At the time of this recording last summer, we're talking about the height of the BLM movement with George Floyd and what happened. We we saw the importance of speaking out. We saw the importance of drawing the attention to. We saw the importance of like actually making movements and change and actually moving forward. And just as we said many times during that time, it's not just about Black Lives Mattering. It is about every life mattering in that space, because we start with the Black lives, but that it extends to other marginalized groups as well, albeit where we come to today, talking about the AAPI, Asian American Pacific Islander rise in violence, that's been happening. It's not something that's new. It's just something that has the attention now. And so, we wanted to have you all on to, kind of give voice, shed some experiences, shed some light, and answer some questions, and just have a good Discord. So I appreciate you all.
I see what you did there. I see what you did there. So let's go ahead and start with a question. What is it like being an Asian American in America today?
So just to give like a brief background of where I'm at right now. So I currently sit in diversity and inclusion at a major tech company. And I also sit on organizations like GLAD, and also the Gay Gaming Professionals help out with different organizations like Lesbians Who Tech and things of that sort. I'm very involved in the community, basically. I try to be somewhat of a safe space and a voice and amplify the voices of underprivileged communities, right? So when you say things like that, you're kind of like, oh, you also have to think about the people in your community. Definitely, I think in the last few weeks, it's been very just evident that Asian Americans are feeling so many different feelings. I can't even pinpoint like just 5, because every day it's something different. Actually, not even every day, probably every hour, right? Something different just comes along where you just become a new emotion or a new feeling. And then you have to basically like identify with what you're feeling. When you're sitting in a space like diversity and inclusion, not only do your feelings count, but the feelings of others count. And that takes a different weight altogether on how you view the world. So to give you an example of like what I'm personally like feeling, I pretty much don't leave my house. I don't go alone. If I do go anywhere, I let my mom know, I let my fiance know, I let my stepdad know. Like these are my whereabouts for like the next few hours. I'll probably check in on like Instagram or Facebook or something. I mean, that's something that I would have done before, but now it's like I have to. Because if there is like sometimes half an hour or 45 minutes that can go by that no one hears from me, they'll be like, hey, where are you at? Like, are you okay? And that is a lot different than it was like, just in the height of, the pandemic, where you're just kind of like, where you're at home. So now it's like, okay, grocery store, no one goes by themselves. We have to go in, like a team, like meaning like me, my mom and my stepdad, or my mom, my stepdad, and sometimes my fiance. It's like, it's a challenge. And every day it becomes something much more and more difficult. So my answer to how is it being an Asian American in America today? Fearful.
That's heavy, heartbreaking to hear.
Just to piggyback off of what Abbie said, that yes, it is fearful today to be like an Asian American, but that doesn't not make me proud of who I am. Like I'm still happy to be Asian American, but it's just scary with everything going on. And what Z said, like it's more coming into light. It has been happening. It's just more frequent with social media being so big now. It makes it so apparent where a few years ago we probably wouldn't have seen it, but it was happening. And for myself, I am home too, like with, from the pandemic. And then with my parents, they do own their own business. So for me, I'm checking up on them like every hour just because I don't know what's going to happen to them. They're like 5 minutes down the street, but, God forbid something were to happen, like my mom can run, but for my dad, he's partially handicapped, from his past stroke. So for me, it's like fearful for like what would happen to them. And like I can't be there to protect them. So just to piggyback, like it is fearful, but it doesn't sway for me to not be proud who I am.
Speaking on my perspective, it's pretty disheartening because I moved from Texas to California at a young age. I've never heard really any racial comments until the last 4 years. I don't know how many times I've been called chink, go back to China. It's actually made me feel more observant around everything now. Before it was kind of like, as martial artists, that we're always aware of our surroundings, but now it's even to the point where I'm observing everything, like who's approaching me, is my wife okay, all those little things. Like it's even gotten me to the point where I'm becoming more aggressive, as in like maybe I should get a concealed weapon permit. It's one of those things that I'm constantly looking around, and I personally don't like that feeling, but in the last 4 years, it's becoming more and more aggressive with people like approaching me. So.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. The fear is there, but like you're still proud of where you're from. I also somewhat noticed that it's always been here. However, you didn't see it on the news, and when it was, your brain automatically doesn't think, oh, that's a racist thing. This is racism. You think there's a possibility that he did something wrong. There was always like an excuse for before you thought or jumped straight to, oh, it's because of where I'm from. But now when I walk, like I've always had that fear because I'm kind of paranoid when I walk anywhere by myself because I'm mainly someone who likes staying at home. But like yesterday, I remember I was walking with my mom and my brother, and I would note when cars would stop or if they would park, where they were, how many people were inside. And I'm like, what would I do? And that's where my brain automatically goes now, because before I would think, oh, am I doing something wrong? Is there something that I'm possibly doing that, am I stepping on like grass, doing something? Like my brain would think that. And then now the idea that it's because of something I can't control, it's become more of a defense immediately, rather than just be like, oh, I should make sure that I'm doing something to make myself look better or whatever. But yeah, that's where my brain's been the past couple of weeks whenever I go out. I mainly have been telling people when they ask me, they're like, are you okay? I'm like, I don't go out. I don't go out. This makes me not want to go out more.
Like everyone, it is kind of a scary time. And I think part of the fear stems from the fact that we can't hide. So, and I say this because, so my mentor, he is Jewish ethnic background. And, we had this conversation together where he could at least pass, right? He could pass for a Caucasian, but, African Americans, Asian Americans, there's no way we could do that. We could never be passively Caucasian. And so, if there is some motivation out there to target our specific groups, it's easier to find us. I kind of thought this, I don't know why I was like super worried about this podcast. So I thought I should do homework. So I was doing all of this reading in preparation for this podcast because I thought I had to read a bunch. But not that I didn't know anything already, but before this pandemic started, my friend in Hong Kong, he's kind of like a sports writer and tech blogger that's based in Hong Kong. And he told me at the beginning of the pandemic, and he's from Southern California. He told me at the beginning of the pandemic, he said, you know what, Maria, like, I'm not worried about coronavirus in the United States for you guys. You have plenty of space so that you can spread out and avoid the disease. I'm worried about all of the violence that may get targeted at Asian Americans over there. And this was at the beginning of the pandemic, like way back in March. And I didn't really understand what he was talking about back then because I was just trying to process what was going on with everything getting shut down. But, as time went on, it just got more and more disturbing with the rhetoric in the news and in the media. And then you have websites like Parler and Facebook groups, and then it just got more and more violent in the news. And then there became more and more actual incidents of violence, and he really just read the tea leaves on that one. So yes, the fear is real, and there's very real reason to be afraid at this time.
Amiga, can I piggyback off of like where I came from with the whole fear thing? Just because it did stem from somewhere specific. And I didn't speak up about it until now because it just, is a matter of it's a matter of finally being seen, right? And being like totally just like acknowledged. Long story short, the beginning of the pandemic, obviously everyone was running around and gathering whatever the supplies they needed and everything like that, which was totally understandable. The reason I say that I became fearful even more so is because my mom was assaulted at a retail space in the height of the pandemic because she was Asian. And there's only very few things that will ever make me think of violence or revenge or just anything ill will. Like, it will take a lot, and hurting my mom is one of those things. I'm not going to name the retailer. I'm not going to be specific. I will just say it was a big name retail space, and the employees didn't do anything. They just watched. My mom is okay. However, obviously, that situation had caused her to be like, okay, we're not going out anymore, like, at all. Now, this is in the very beginning of the pandemic. Yeah, mind you, like, no one was going out, but she really wasn't going out. Like, I actually personally had to deliver groceries. Instacart definitely was something very prevalent in my house, her house, like there was no more her going anywhere. I reported the incident to the corporate office of this retailer, and I will never forget what they sent me. I mean, talk about a slap in the face. They sent me a $5 gift certificate. And the email said, "We're so sorry you had a less than stellar experience at our retail store."
What?
So my mom's pain, my mom's anguish, my mom's fear, it was worth $5 to this major retailer. And the words, less than stellar experience. So that's what we're calling violence on your space, on your turf, while your employees watched. How did I know the employees watched? Because I literally called that store and I said, I want to speak to every person who was working, because I need to speak to someone to know what exactly transpired and if other, people like witnessed it or whatever. This is my mom, okay? So like there's no logic. But the thing is that I just had gotten my position in diversity and inclusion where I'm at. So I couldn't very well be so public about my anger because I was scared. So that was my bad. And that's the situation that I was in when this whole pandemic started. is that I had to shut my mouth. I had to be careful what I had to say, even though, yeah, I was ready to basically beat someone down for hurting my mom. Okay, those are that's the only time that I think I ever thought about violence. Okay, fast forward like a year later, I basically confessed to my company when all of this like started happening that I was having really ill will feelings and I might want to call this company out. I asked for advice from my mentor like at my company, and he was like, you have to do what you have to do. The fact that you are in this space should allow you to basically finally voice that frustration. So I reached out again to that company and I just kind of like revisited the email and the phone calls that transpired, during that time, and nothing. Talked to my mom again and I was like, is there anything that you feel that we need to do? She's like, no, it happened. It's fine. And I was like, it's not fine. But she's basically like, I just want to move past that because that was traumatic. But I just will never forget that a $5 gift certificate is what they sent as like, we're sorry. So sorry your mom got hurt during business hours, when it was definitely very racially, motivated, because the person was basically yelling out a lot of stereotypes. So that's where my fear comes from.
That makes all the sense in the world. And I just want to say thank you for opening your heart and letting us in on such a traumatic experience.
Yeah.
I am beyond sorry to hear about this. And the part that really angers me the most is this happens all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't mean just against the AAPI community. I just mean all of our communities. This is what it is. Something's going to happen, and then they just give you a couple of dollars and just be like, oh, my bad, move on.
Mm-hmm.
Like we don't matter, and that's very, very, very disheartening. And there's no place for that. There's no place for that. We're there. We're here for you.
I know, and I appreciate that. And Stephanie, my heart goes to you because I know that feeling of wanting to check on your parents every hour. I literally check on my mom all the time. Thank God she's always on Facebook Messenger. But like the minute she doesn't answer, that little pitter patter like happens. And I'm just like, where the heck did you go? You didn't tell us you were going anywhere. It's so weird, right? The roles are reversed. It's now we're like parenting our parents. Like, where are you going? Who are you going with? What time are you be home? Like, but that's like our reality now, and Sammy, you were talking about like having these thoughts about getting a weapon. I was like, is there like basically a retractable bat that looks like an umbrella that my mom can like put in like her purse, like I literally was like,
there's a baton. But I think it's
see?
illegal.
Having thoughts like that, right? Like, oh, maybe that's a nice gift to give to my mom, like who thought like that like years ago.
See, it's very interesting you bring this up too, is because when I went to go take my firearms test, there was a lot of Asian American. There was a lot of Asian people, older Asian people, doing the exact same thing. This is 8 months ago. It was so many. I messaged my wife. I was like, "There's a lot of older Asian people here," and I was like, kind of like, not confused, but I was concerned. I was like, "What is going on that I'm not getting?" And then I took a step back and I was like, well, what do they call this? That means something's going on around this community and nobody's talking about it. And that was the biggest thing, because I noticed that there were young people, but there was a lot of elderly people there. And I'm like, yo, I hope you're not getting a 45, because you're going to break a hip, a back, and everything. You better not hold nothing heavy. They're getting little things, and they're all like, there was a lot of people. And I'm only saying that because it was like my observation then was like, this is interesting. But now fast forward to today, now it's like, oh, this is why. This is why, because they have to come and they have to take up arms. And something that's been really bothersome for me personally is looking at these videos that have been traumatizing everybody, daily. But the part that's been hurting me the most is I'm seeing it's our youth. They've been putting it on our youth. And that's what's been bothering me. I was in Oakland yesterday, San Leandro, excuse me, and an Asian family was walking by, elderly, like a whole family, grandma, grandpa, mother, father, kids. I felt like I had to overly seem friendly so they could just walk past me comfortably. So I made a point to look at them and smile. Hi, how are you? And she's like, hello, nice shoes. I'm like, thank you. And I'm making a point to say, I see you. I'm not a threat. It's okay. I shouldn't have to do that. I mean, but you guys know me. That's just me in general. But I know that they had a fear because they see a bunch of black dudes over there. They don't know. I don't want that fear anymore. And that's just where we're at today. We're afraid of each other now.
Like it's been said, it's always been like that though. You know, there's always been these seeds of division planted. There's these seeds of fear, the racist attacks. Like it's not the first time it's happened. It's the first time that this is being brought up, you know. Like we can go down, you know, like what are the kinds of experiences everyone's gone through, but I feel like I don't want to I don't like reliving trauma because I mean like it's painful. I mean, unless it's something that you need to get out and get off your chest 100%, but at the same time, you know, like O said, you know, we're turning on the TV, we're turning on the news, we're seeing it on social media, you know, the trauma porn that is happening, you know. I caught myself in the middle of it the other day. I mean, just I, I had to give a hurrah for this, but it was also like a sad moment because there was a older Asian woman in San Francisco who got beat on, but like beat the shit out of her attacker. Like he was in a stretcher at the end of it, but like her eye was swollen. You could obviously see she needed help. Like I had to give her like, yeah, like a fuck yeah, give it to him. But like also at the same time, like, what the fuck? Like seriously? Like that it even has to get to that level, you know? So yeah, I mean, so it's I mean, we see all these things. We're going to ignite, and like those seeing those initially, yes, should spark the same feelings that it should spark. You know, of like outrage, of this should not happen anymore, and how do we fix this? But kind of along those lines, like, what are some non-common solutions that you would find helpful to these sorts of problems?
Specifically violence or
I mean, the violence, you know, racism. I mean, I always believe like education is power. You know, knowledge is power. You know, and it's important in those situations because you know people can sometimes make the right choice. But like, uh, you know, so I want to explore that whether it's just violence, whether it's just like racist interactions. I mean, there are also those microaggressions, the unconscious bias that people have. I mean, I know it's a open-ended question, but I feel like there's a lot to cover.
yeah, I think that's a really big question because there's a lot of things that people can do in their everyday lives professionally and just in their everyday interactions. Like Anthony and his little interactions with that couple that he walked by. I mean, that may not seem like a big deal, but it probably made an impact for, you know, those individuals that were there. But I think on a larger scale, you know, I don't know about the other interviewees on this podcast, but I think it's really important to break the culture of what our parents was telling us to do, which is to assimilate and not make waves. Because when I was growing up, you know, I had the crap beat out of me in middle school and I got suspended because I went to like a predominantly Caucasian school and I was still going by my Chinese name or whatever. So the school was like, well, it's only fair to suspend both people, even though I was attacked. And then my dad was like, well, we just shouldn't say anything. Like, we should just like not make waves. And so we should just let it happen. So I got a suspension on my record, even though I was the one that was beat up. Okay, that's fine. But, you know, again, he was always telling me, like, you don't want to be up here, you don't want to be down here. You just kind of want to coast in the middle with no one paying attention to you, because you'll live your life a lot more peacefully because no one's paying attention enough to make any troubles for you. So on that end, I think it's really important that people don't just live by the don't make waves. I mean, in that vein, last year, so I'm an attorney. Last year, the State Bar of California did its first diversity report on attorneys. And in their, collection of data or whatever, they found that only 3% of partners in all of California are Asian women. Only 3% out of all attorneys. Okay, all attorneys in California, only 3% are Asian women. Okay, and the other minority groups are not that much better. I couldn't remember if any one of them peaked above 5% of other non-Caucasian groups. Okay, and I'll go to I'm not going to name the law firm, but I went to a lot of big law firms' websites, and they'll say, we appreciate diversity, and they have all these minorities as their associates. But if you click on the tab where it shows who the leadership is, as in the executive committee of partners, they are not any minorities. There's none. There's not one. So in that regard, I feel like another solution would be that, everyone tries to push as hard as they can and try to use the position that they have. Maybe they might not be at the top. Maybe they might be middle management or even lower level management or even not management at all. But the fact that they don't keep quiet about these kind of things, and there's a polite way to bring these things up too, but just to bring it to people's attention, because if you ignore it and you don't say anything about it, then people think that that problem doesn't exist. And they'll say, oh, I never experienced it, or I never heard about it, so it's not a real thing.
It's super interesting that you say that, Maria, because something that I observed, and I'd love your thoughts on this. Something I observed the other day is, have you noticed the amount of diversity and inclusion positions that all of a sudden just started popping up at every company, every industry? It's like, D&I this, D&I that, D&I this, D&I that. And then you're like, so where was your D&I before all this happened? Because was it not important?
Somebody had to make
all of a
waves.
sudden,
Somebody had to make waves.
Okay, yes, which is great. But now I also feel like diversity and inclusion is almost like becoming trendy and reactive, and that's just my honest to God opinion. It's become not proactive but a reactive behavior.
You know what it is? It's a conscience clearer for them. Oh, we have this role for diversity and inclusion, so we don't have to feel bad when we have all these microaggressions occurring elsewhere, because we have this role that we can say we created for this.
For sure. And it's like, that's great right now, but when will it end? That means that it's going to end, because reactions only last for so long.
Until the problem goes away.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, I hate to bring up more politics into this. Not that this isn't a very political issue. I mean, it's pervasive in America. But, I almost kind of got that feeling that, oh, we elected Obama, so we've done enough. Like we've totally done enough of all of that because we've elected Obama. And
yeah, racism ended with Obama.
Yeah,
Didn't you know
and
that?
it's like, okay, no.
That's
No,
very
that's not how it
interesting
works.
because everybody said that. So many people that said, "What do you mean? America's not racist. We have a black president." Be like,
So it's fine. It's over.
so what? Your favorite basketball team's got black players on it. What does that mean? You still
Bare
called me
minimum.
angry yesterday, but you were rooting for LeBron today. I mean, what was the difference?
But that comment that you made, Abbie, it's extremely timely in my own personal life, only because as recent as last week, I brought it up to leadership at my firm, and I was like, hey, I think it would be, not only important for our firm to have a point of view, but also it would be great marketing because, we work with some management companies that are Black-owned businesses, and they've said things to me like, hey, we noticed your firm didn't have a statement, you didn't do a client blast or a LinkedIn post or like anything like that about the current state of affairs. And, I told them, I was like, I totally agree with you. I agree with 100% with what you're saying. And, we didn't have a firm-wide statement to our clients when things were happening last summer with the BLM movement. And right now, it would be a really great time for us to revive that conversation and maybe put something out. And the response to me, which was kind of unfortunate, was, oh, well, we don't really want to take a position. That's a really difficult subject. And, it's a slippery slope because it'll lead into maybe us having to take a position in more controversial subjects. And I was like, since when was anti-hate controversial? Shouldn't everyone be anti-hate? I mean, I don't think that would be, what kind of clients would leave us because we support anti-hate? I just don't understand.
I mean, what kind of clients are we getting that support hate? Like,
Exactly. So there's that too. And, it was kind of unfortunate for me because, okay, yeah, I recognize that in our law firm specifically, like, yeah, okay, like just maybe like me and two others that are, non-primary group. So, I at least said what I said. So I wasn't just trucking along being quiet. And I did struggle with it because I thought, hey, I'm not trying to make waves because I'm an ambitious person and I don't want this to be the hidden chip behind me that's keeping me back or holding me down under that glass ceiling. But I still felt like it was important to use my position to say something about it because there are others that would not necessarily get the opportunity to have that be heard.
And good for you. You literally have created space for, not only for yourself to have your voice be heard, but you're basically being like, I need a seat at that table and I need to say what I need to say. So kudos to you for that. Like, honestly, because there's a lot of people that can sometimes be in a position of power and they know that they can make positive change, but they just choose not to because, for whatever reason, right? And I think that that's what's like super important now is like everyone is use your platform, whatever your platform may be, for positive change. Whatever positive change means for you, that's what you should definitely use as like your basically your mission statement. What is your calling? What is your industry? What is your stance on things? It doesn't have to be political. It could just be like how you're feeling on the daily, right? This is why I also highly encourage companies to have ERGs, like have employee resource groups where, certain communities can have their own space so that they can talk about their culture, they can talk about their backgrounds, they can talk about the things that are really, truly like impactful and meaningful to them. And then on a much larger scale, that company or whoever can basically hear out all of those ERGs. And then hopefully there'll be like a much more harmonious environment. Like that's just my hope for like all companies is that listen to the people that are basically the foundation of what your organization or company is. That's all it comes down to.
No, I agree with what Maria and Abbie were saying. Like, I feel exactly what Abbie said. Like, it is very reactionary, like with the whole D&I, all these roles coming up. For me, I think I'm kind of sitting here like, what is your end game? What is your goal? Like, are you just being reactive so that you're with the pool of people to support this anti-hate? Like what is the band-aid? You're just putting a band-aid on it and then it's going to come off. So like, what is your goal at the end by building your D&I team? So I think like, some companies do have a bigger vision, but all these other companies, it's kind of like, why all of a sudden you're reacting? But then what is your end game? Like, what are you trying to accomplish using your platforms to change everyone's view? And, but it's just kind of like, oh, I'm just going to go with the flow. Everyone's doing it so that I can just kind of align and show that I'm supporting. But are you really?
I am so glad you said that. Now, we're going to go back to the BLM time, okay? Because I'm going to speak on something personal that I felt, and then it's going to come full circle. So at that time, I was very angry. Not just because of what was happening, but because of what I was seeing a lot of silence. And I was hearing silence in certain spaces that offended me heavily. And I say that in the martial arts community. That hurt me deep. I'm not going to say any names. You understand where I'm coming from with this. He will as well. But one specific community, because their head is a black man. And that hurt me. I felt like there should have been something said in support of him, in support of all these other African American masters that have contributed their life to this art, to this organization, to these schools, to this community. I feel that very heavily, which is why, and I said full circle, because recently I posted my Stop Asian Hate, but I took a specific picture, and I took the picture of the mat, of the floor, and I said, if you have any connection to what this is, then you need to speak up now. Because if you do not, you are doing a disservice to the culture that brought you what you study. And that meant everything to me. That really said something, because it's like, I cannot say I do Taekwondo, I do Muay Thai, I do Jiu-Jitsu, I do all this stuff, who are clearly Asian martial arts, and be silent. That is not okay. So I want to ask you guys, how do you feel about that silence? Because Maria, when you spoke about flying through the middle, don't get noticed, don't make waves, I heard that. That's why a lot of people were silent when it came to the BLM movement. They didn't want to make waves. So I see that happening again, where they still don't want to make waves unless they have a personal connection, as in their spouse or somebody that they are involved with closely. A lot of people still will be silent. So if you notice that, why is that? Go ahead. I can hear it. I can hear it in your breath.
I think I think that people need to separate, like what you were discussing about, the Black Lives Matter movement, and how like all these companies didn't want to partake because they said it was a political thing. It's not a political thing. It's hate. That's just how it is. It's like the Asian thing right now. I've heard a lot of people at my own job saying like, oh, that's just a political thing. We shouldn't stand on that. Why is it a political thing? We're actually being attacked. The Black Lives Matter movement was, injustice and people being attacked. This is not a political thing. This is just human decency. And I think a lot of companies are saying like, well, if we take a stand with this side, we're going to lose business. I mean, do you really want business from those type of customers though? That's how I see it.
It's
Those
unfortunate.
customers got money.
Well, yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, they don't care as long as they're getting paid. Like money talks. As I like Killer Mike put it perfectly. Money talks, because we gotta put our money where our mouth is. Kind of that sense of like, not just talking and bringing awareness, but also putting it behind support of these different communities, putting it behind the production of different things that help uplift the community. What doesn't matter what it is.
Well, just from what I heard from Sammy's comments, I mean, I tend to generally agree because I'm directly experiencing it at my job. But, this country's had a really difficult time with race relations because it is so intertwined with this hidden class structure. And, a lot of it has to do with this class warfare. And I think Lyndon B. Johnson said it the best, which, this guy being a Southerner, he pretty much summed up America's race issue as, if you can make the poorest white man think he's better than the best black man, he'll empty his own pockets for you. So they've really capitalized on that idea. And to some certain extent, there's a lot to unpack there because it hits on so many different areas in this country and how things are woven together. And that's why you see certain groups suppressed in a certain way. And you see, people unable to move through the class system. And it's not necessarily always race. A lot of it is class. And then they've kind of pitted class and race together so that they're kind of against each other. and not actually looking at what's happening up here with this 1% situation. So, I mean, I don't want to marginalize the race issues at all because they're real issues, but we can't ignore the fact that there's a class warfare going on that's encouraging this to continue.
When we divide, they will conquer. It is that mentality that they will continue to push. Like, it is so apparent that I'm like, if we got all the leaders in every single community together, it was like, yo, this is what is happening. It happened back in a time where we didn't have this level of communication, this level of connection that we do now. Like, we can essentially take it and flip it on its head, you know, by understanding, because not just to what you said, not just the class warfare and then the racial warfare, but you have colorism within your own communities. Come on, like they figured out ways to separate you within your own home. If your kid comes out darker than the rest of the family, what are they? The black sheep. Why is it called the black sheep? The idea of colorism, to keep one person down at all times and to keep everyone divided. Go ahead, Zora.
It's like that metaphor of how you have these people just eating at a table and then the crumbs sort of fall to the floor and everyone's just fighting over the crumbs, the bare minimum. And things like classism, and also like the idea of the minority sort of fighting. That's why there's the Asians are considered the model minority, and that sort of mentality of being like, well, you're not as marginalized the other minorities. Why should you have to? What do you have to complain about? But that's not the issue. That's not the point. And people can't get. And I feel like that's the issue, because people can't get past that question. Because when that question comes up, you're like, there are people who back down because you're like, oh yeah, I have all of this. What do I have to complain about? But there's still people, like there's still that fence you got to push against. There's more to life than what is immediately around us. And I think that's a big issue.
I'm so glad that you brought that up, because it actually leads to this next question. All right, so within that context of like the model minority, of Asians being labeled the model minority, do you see what the reward that the model minorities have been given? Being labeled as white in America. So I am curious about that, about everyone's feelings surrounding Asians being considered white.
Okay, I will speak on this. So I I grew up in a predominantly white neighborhood. I went to predominantly white schools. So I naturally gravitated to the white community because that's what was predominantly around me, right? Now, as a Filipino person, I really prided myself on the fact that I was Filipino. I was like, oh, like I'm Filipino. Like I know that about myself. But when you have other Filipinos who say, why are you so whitewashed? Now, that was something that was told to me when I was, God, I like as young as maybe like 8. I can remember. Why are you so whitewashed? Act more Filipino. Why can't you be more Filipino? And as an adult, now I kind of look back at it and I'm like, what the hell did they mean? What about me was whitewashed? Because I hung out with, like white boys and girls. Well, hello, that's all that was around me in my school. I think there was like 3 other Asians in my public school, like alone. Okay, that I can count. So from what I remember, there was only like 3 of us. So yeah, I was whitewashed in the sense that like I was predominantly around white people. Okay, and then obviously once I became old enough to date, I dated nothing but white boys. And it's not because I didn't want to date outside of like my race and, you know, all of that. That's who I gravitated to. That's what was like around me. I didn't know anything else. I grew up in Millbrae. Okay. So that was like it was predominantly white everywhere you went. But when you have people in your family, in your circle saying to you, like, why can't you be Filipino enough? I never understood what the hell does that mean? And all my life, honestly, that's what was said to me, like, you're just not Filipino enough, so you can't hang out with the Filipino crew. You're not white, you can't hang out with the white crew. So it's like, I think that's the reason why, you know, once I got to like high school and college, I had a very diverse like group because they were the ones that also didn't quite like fit in. But I have always just felt like if I like you, I like you. If you're a good person, you're a good person. I don't see color, I don't see background, I don't see any of that. I just see like, are you a nice individual? Are you a good individual? Do you have a good heart? Like, I know that sounds cheesy, but that's honestly how I felt, because I would always hear in the back of my head, Abbie, you're whitewashed and you're not Filipino enough. I was bullied by Filipino girls growing up, and I just didn't understand it because I was like, we're the same. We're Filipino. Why are you guys picking on me? That's my story.
It's very crazy you say that. First of all, has anybody seen The Last Dragon? The movie The Last Dragon, Bruce Leroy. Well, if you have not, or if you have, you're looking at Bruce Leroy to people. And I say that because people would look at me like, you're black, but you do karate. Oh man, you're not really black. You know, like my cousins would be like, oh man, you hella bougie. Oh, bro, you hella bougie. You this, you that. You're not really black. Oh man. I'm like, well, why? I'm like, why? Because I haven't been to jail? Because I'm not in a gang? Because I haven't done all this stuff? Is that what's gonna make me black? Is that gonna give me my black card? Because that's it. I don't need it. I won't get jobs like you. You know, I get discriminated just like you. I think that would make us the same. But you know, like people be like, nah, you do that other stuff. But then fast forward to now, it's like, oh man, you do all that other stuff, man. That's cool. I'm like, yeah. But remember back when I was younger, when you guys had all that yin yang you were talking about? Remember all that stuff you used to say about me? This is why I'm able to do what I do. So sometimes it's like, it doesn't matter if you're not enough for them. You weren't meant for them. You know, Abbie, you are an amazing Filipino woman who is so great as a person, for your culture, for your community. You just weren't good enough for them. But then again, their standards were how low? Because your standards were obviously higher than what they were expected and what they were ready for. And
Also,
that's how I take things.
Also, being someone who is, has constantly met with that. You know, I remember being in school, just being like, you know, like, why do you sound like that? I mean, like, what do you mean? Why do I sound like that? It's just how I'm talking. But okay. And I didn't get it. They're like, oh, you don't sound black. It was like, fuck does it mean to sound black? And we've been down this road. You know, we talk about African American vernacular. We talk about, the I guess the colorism, the separation within, you know, like essentially that was the divide. You got to see that divide happen like in real time. You know, you had on your side being told, you know, you're not Filipino enough, you sound white, you act white, you're this, you're that. Whereas, you know, I don't want to take away from anybody else's experience, but like, the other way of like, you're too dark.
I was gonna say I grew up almost the same sort of experience that you did, Abbie. I grew up in a school that's predominantly Caucasian. There was like one other a black kid, and then when I went into my high school for the first time, there was another Filipino, and she was a fourth year, and she came up to me, and we had never met. She was like, you're Asian. And then she gave me this big hug and I was like, hi. I was very traumatized. But I had never, it had never occurred to me, the whole race thing. Cause I just surrounded by, it was all religious talk mainly. And so I was just like, I didn't really think about it until, ironically enough, I went to college in the Philippines. And that was a huge culture shock because I'm Filipino. It didn't occur to me how American I was until I was in the Philippines surrounded by actual Filipinos. And I was like, there was always that separation. And then I became way more proud of being where I was born, which was California. And it took me a while because you're taught from a young age to try and assimilate here in the States. And so when I went back to the Philippines, trying to assimilate back into your own culture that you're supposed to know, it was so hard. I would not talk because my accent would come out. I would try to talk with a Filipino accent, but I'd sound so Californian. They're like, oh, I know where you're from. So I would let how I look dictate how people would see me. And that was my reality. And it wasn't until that time, and because I was darker than some of my other classmates, it was the color of my skin. And I had two other classmates who were Filipino also, but they were half and they looked white. They would always go to them and be like, hey, and they would talk in English and they're like, no, it's her. And they would look at me like, her? But she's so dark. I'm like, why is that an issue? One. And then so I thought that was just a thing in the Philippines. I don't know why. And then when I moved, I had my transition from the Philippines back to the US. So I was calling, I think it was the board in Nevada, because we were thinking of moving there. And I was talking to the lady about my transcripts and stuff. She had assumed, I think, I was in California. The moment I had told her that I was from the Philippines, her intonation changed. Her whole, like, she was like, oh, you're from the Philippines. And then I was like, wait, why are you being hostile with me? I'm trying to tell you that I was born there. And it was this whole struggle of trying to get her to accept me. And it was no longer about my academics. It was about me trying to prove that I belonged over there. And that's when it sort of started to click. I was like, I don't really belong here or there.
Zoreen, I'm giving you a virtual hug right now because I totally get you. I totally get you.
But yeah, it's
The fear of not belonging, right? Mm-hmm. The fear of you don't belong to your people, and the fear that you don't belong anywhere else. That's something that I had to live with also. And just like you, when I went to the Philippines, I was told don't speak because they're going to be able to tell that you're not from here. And I'm like, the hell? Don't speak? They're like, they're going to know you're an American. And especially if you go to like the shops and try to negotiate price, they're going to get you for everything that they can get you for. Like, long story short, the feeling of belonging has just, ever since I was little to even till today, is a struggle. Like, where the hell do I really truly belong? Because even as like just very impactful Filipino women, there's even discrimination within our own Filipino communities to belong. Let me give you an example. I'm not going to name names, but there is a huge conference for impactful entrepreneur, very just driven, motivated Filipino women. It's an invite only conference. I've never been invited. Never. And I know that sounds so petty to say, but I almost feel like sometimes I do want to ask, like, the positions that I've held have all been very impactful in like diversity and inclusion. why am I not invited to this conference? Again, that's my feeling of not belonging to that community. It's tough. But would I even want to be a part of that conference? You know what I mean? Like it's right. It's been years. And like, you know, the organizer, she'll give me props, but it's like when it's invite time, I still don't get an invite. So I'm just like, again, it's that feeling of I guess I'm not Filipino enough.
You're perfectly Filipino, Abbie, 100%.
So are you. You know, like yeah.
I mean, I think like it really like hurts me that like Abbie and Zareen like had to go through that from where you guys like grew up, like being in like the predominant like Caucasian community. Like at least for myself, like growing up where I went to school, it was actually predominantly Asian. So, you know, like there was a lot of others like me, you know, like other Chinese, Vietnamese, Filipinos, you know, the whole spectrum. So I think growing in that community helped me, and with, you know, the support of my parents coming here is like seeing no color, like what Abbie said, like I just want to see if that person is truly a good-hearted person. And now that like growing up and seeing like all this Asian hate, I'm just like, where does that stem from? You know, it kind of like, should we be starting it young? We're like teaching it from, you know, in elementary school, we're teaching kids, whether it is a predominantly Caucasian community, Asian community, whatever community it is, like it should stem and teach children to not see color. You know, like they should be with people that they like, you know, like them, have interests, but we have to break the stereotypes. I think, I don't know where kids are, you know, learning it, like, you know, through social media or from their friends, but teaching them young would give them a better perspective. And, you know, my heart does go to both Abbie and Zareen, you know, that enduring that. And you guys are very Filipino, you know, you guys should be proud of who you are and don't let anyone, you know, make you think otherwise.
So I think I kind of had a little bit of both experiences where I went, you know, I immigrated to this country. English is not my first language. My parents heavily focused on assimilating. They sent me to a predominantly Caucasian private school till I was 8th grade. And then for high school, I was like, I cannot tolerate private school anymore. Like, I feel like this is not a real view of what the real world looks like. So they sent me to Branham with Anthony. No, it was a good experience overall, but no, it's really difficult to assimilate in a new country at the same time when you're trying to learn a new language, because you're trying to learn the culture and at the same time learn the language. And, you know, all you experience is how different you are with everything you do. Your clothes are different, your food is different, how you talk is different, how you look is different, everything you do is different. And you kind of grow up thinking everything that you knew in the world before and what your parents are teaching you and everything at home is somehow wrong. And everything that everybody else is doing is somehow right. And so you kind of grow up with all of this little self-conscious feeling about how no matter what you do, you're kind of just like not quite there. And you're just kind of like, you know, not like you're kind of like the knockoff goods or something like that. Like you're just not the authentic thing that belongs in whatever's on the shelf. And then I went to college in Irvine, and at UC Irvine, it's a lot of Asian Americans. And so I had never been in a situation like that before, where I'd been with a lot of Asian Americans that were of similar backgrounds and had similar experiences to myself. And so I did get the benefit of experiencing both feeling like the other and then just being more with others that have had similar experiences with myself. It did help me develop more confidence in what I was doing and how I fit into this world, and, you know, to not think about it as much. Living in Irvine is a little bit of a benefit, only because I think like the last statistic I heard, it was something like 60% Asians in that city or something like that. But Orange County historically has been extremely conservative. So surrounding areas around Irvine is a very different demographic. And doing my line of work, I would go into industry events and it would feel like when I was growing up again, because like there's like me and that's it. So I think having that as my background, assimilating into this country, it did help me develop certain defense mechanisms so that I could, I don't want to say I'm wearing a mask, but I could front like I belong there. And let's just be real, okay? Like a human's natural inclination is to not trust those that don't look like you. And so if you don't kind of draw them in to make them feel like, no, like we have the same problems, like we have similar issues in our lives. Like you could look at me like I'm one of you. Then it kind of goes a long way towards building a bridge so that you can have other types of conversations. And I think, and going back to the question about solutions, I mean, that's a solution, is to be friends with people that don't look like you. So then you kind of look at other people that don't look like you and don't feel threatened all the time or don't think that they're alien. So I think those experiences are very important for most people, and to just have conversations like this generally.
Yeah, I feel like I agree. I 100% agree with you. I think exposure to different cultures is very, very, very important, because what you don't, for a lot of people, their reality is what's in front of them. So if they're not if it's not there, it's like, does it really exist or not? It feels like it's someone else's world. It's someone else's problem. And I feel like that might be the reason why it's only starting now, wherein like people are talking about Asian hate more, because it's more in our face, because we're seeing it more, and we know people who are experiencing it more. But no, I 100% I agree that that having more exposure to different cultures would help in getting people to understand one another.
So would you say, like, if we took people who had racist tendencies, or people who were uneducated in other areas that might benefit from that sort of exposure, if we took them and dropped them in a spot and had a complete immersion, do you think that would help kind of squash those deep rooted feelings?
I think I was brought up differently, because I grew up in martial arts, so I communicate with different race and cultures. It didn't really turn into the whole separation until I hit high school, where, oh, you're Asian, you got to be with the Asians. You can't be crossing with the jocks, the white people, and all that. They're completely separated, right? I believe, like I said, I feel like I was blessed because I was interacting with different cultures and martial arts. And martial arts, you're just kind of like, if you're a good person, I'll fuck with you. If you're not a good person, then, fuck it, out of the way. But I think...
Are you allowed to say those words?
Yeah, no, I asked in the very beginning.
I was like, oh!
I asked in the very beginning. So
he did anyways. He didn't care.
I think, touching upon what everyone else was saying, I'm listening intently. That's why I'm not interacting as much, because I'm hearing all the stories. And I told Anthony when we were on mute that I'm just really loving everyone's experience and everyone's expressing themselves. I think just to touch upon the model citizen that you're saying, with one of the questions before, I think a model minority is because the stereotype is Asians are very submissive. We're very like, oh, give all the work to this person, they can do it. They won't complain. They won't make a loud noise. They're the model minority, right? I find that bullshit, right? Mostly because Asian Americans, like myself, like I'm the first one to snap. I'll be the first one to say something. While my mom and my dad would be like, don't cause any waves at all. Shut up. You have a job. You just do your job, go home. I can't do that. But in general too, what the number one line that I've been hearing, they said, white is right.
Like as a joke?
No, not at all. They say
this like seriously.
They said you can't be different from the predominantly Caucasians. So they'll say it in a way that's saying white is right. So that never really hit me until like as I was thinking along with it, and I was like, that doesn't make any sense to me. You should be making it by your hard work, by your experience, by the way you communicate with customers. They're saying your mentality has to be a certain way. Don't make yourself as a threat. Make yourself as this type of model, basically.
Isn't that interesting? Because we've all heard that. Mind you, we don't look alike. But we've heard this.
Really?
We've heard this, and it's interesting because even those higher ups that are, whether they're female, whether they're LGBTQ plus, whether they're black, whether whatever, they all have the same mentality majority of the time. And that's the crazy part. That's the disheartening part, because then they look at you like, well, I made it. Why don't you? You got to do. And they start sounding like all the other people. They start using terms like, why don't you pull yourself up by your own bootstraps and get up here? It's like, whoa, what are you talking about?
I have no boots.
That's right.
And
I need to buy a pair of boots first.
and I don't know if you guys
Someone
experienced
give me
this.
some boots.
And just to add this on, I don't know if you guys experienced this, but for me personally, since I've been code switching, I've been called a banana many times.
You're called a what?
A banana. Asian on the outside.
No, I know what a banana is.
I'm just saying, dude, you asking me the question. I'm telling you.
I've never seen the white side of you, so that's what's interesting.
I guess that's another, like term for whitewashed, right? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, right? That's wow.
Radio for us, banana for him, coconuts, they got all the same ones. It's all interesting. It's all weird and
This
stupid.
is so wow.
I don't want to be white. Nothing against white people, but I don't want to be white. I'm proud to be black. I'm proud to have this
same
great
here.
melanin.
I am good the way that I am. I'm proud to be marrying a Caucasian male who grew up in a predominantly like Asian community. So he has always understood, like Filipino background, Chinese, Vietnamese, like he's actually, Joel just doesn't see color or anything either. And I think that's the reason why it just works so perfectly. But, when all of this started to happen, there was a day that we kind of got into it because I was like, okay, we're getting married this year. Are you going to be good for the rest of our life with, sometimes the looks, the whispers, being like, they together? They just friends? He's really married to a Filipino and she's married to a white guy. I'm like, are you going to be good with that? He's like, yeah, of course. But it was one of those days that social media just kept dinging with so much stuff that I was like, we fought. It wasn't even our fight. It was like everything on like Instagram and like Facebook and social media that we were fighting over, which was it was a crazy day.
Do you find it to be more acceptable to be marrying a white male in your community over somebody else?
Oh, as a Filipino?
As a Filipino woman, or even as an Asian American woman, or as a Pacific Islander woman, is it more acceptable? And this is open to the panel. Do you find it is more acceptable, if not somebody of your own community, is it more acceptable to marry or be with a white male than it is somebody else? Let's say, not offering myself, but let's say somebody like me. Don't worry, I know.
Not Anthony specifically.
Not Anthony specifically. No. I'm gonna get the chancla in a minute coming through the door. But
wow. So I want to say back in the day, no. Now as an adult, yes. I don't know why the shift, but so I confronted one of my bullies from high school as an adult. This girl reached out to me. Yeah. This girl reached out to me all trying to be cool, like we homies. And then I'm like, do you remember bullying me in high school? Do you remember stealing my emergency credit card in my backpack? Do you remember stealing my pager? What? Do you remember? So my mom gave me an emergency credit card just in case, right? Like just in case you needed to use it. And these girls stole stuff from my backpack because I wasn't Filipino enough. Anyways, so as an adult, she reached out to me. She was all trying to be cool. And then I was like, I'm just going to take this opportunity. We're grown-ups now. Why did you bully me in high school? She was like, I bullied you? And I'm like, oh yeah, you made my life a living hell. Like, I had to go to the guidance counselor almost like once a week because you and your friends would make my life a living hell. She was like, oh my God, I don't remember that. I'm not the same person anymore. And I was like, whatever, why? And she was like, you just didn't fit in.
Oh.
And I'm like, I didn't fit in? How? She was like, Abbie, you're Filipino and like you're going for like white boys. Like, why couldn't you date like one of the Filipino boys, like, you know, like from, you know, the schools that, you know, basically we dated from? Why couldn't you, I don't know, dress the same way that like we dress? Like, we would have accepted you if you just did that. But you had to make things complicated, and you had to like be friends with this group and this group and this group. Like, it's like you just didn't want to be Filipino. And I'm like, I was like, I am Filipino.
Yes.
My mom and dad are Filipino. Like, what do I have to do? Did I need to eat pancit and lumpia, like, you know, just like in front of you? Did I have to wear, as you said, I wasn't wearing the same kicks that you guys were wearing. So I just don't understand. Like, what about me didn't fit in? And she was just like, you just didn't fit in. We just didn't like you. And I was like, that's good to know, because I've lived how many years of my life wondering why those girls didn't like me. And I'm like, you answered my question, and you know, thank you for that. But I want nothing to do with you. So whatever favor you were going to ask me for, whatever connection you wanted from me, no. Because I want you to know something. You have children now. This is why I said to her, I'm like, you have children now. I hope to God that you don't raise your children to hate, to bully, and to sometimes even push someone so far over the edge that they were questioning if they wanted to live or die. That's what I want for you to do as a mother. And that was the last time I spoke to her.
You know, she cried in the bathroom and in the car the next day. And you know what? Applaud to you. That was beautiful. And I'm glad you were able to do that.
Yeah.
I'm glad you were able to stand up to her and rectify things and get the clarity that you needed.
We don't get opportunities to confront the people that just make our life so difficult. And I just had to take the opportunity. Because for some jaded reason, she thought we were friends. Let me reach out to Abbie. Let me just see how she's doing. And I was like, what made you think we were friends? And she was like, oh, we're grown-ups now. I'm like, yeah, we are. We are.
Oh yeah, I'm about to
And
say
I
some
have
grown-up
never
things.
but I have never forgotten those girls. Never. And they're all, and 98% of them are mothers now. And I just pray that they have changed their ways for the sake of their children. I've been wanting to ask this question of women, especially. Do you sometimes feel discriminated? Okay, so like, do you sometimes feel discriminated against for your status? So meaning like if you are unmarried, if you don't have kids. Because I feel that this is like such an important topic, because I myself, once upon a time when I, you know, wanted to be single, like I prided myself on the fact that I was single, that I didn't have kids. However, in the corporate world, they saw that as, she has all the time in the world. Let me give her project after project after project after project. I would love to hear your guys' take on that.
I don't think I've like experienced like that where I'm a woman or like I'm single. But kind of bringing it back to like our topic about like being Asian, just because for my company, a lot of our upper leadership is predominantly white. And, you know, we have a few, you know, minority leaders, but, you know, when I'm like going up the chain, like, you know, like when you're like, oh, what's my next step? I'm going to be a senior, then this, it really stops at like a ceiling for us. And I feel that a lot of the minorities, we're like kind of like the workhorses where, you know, you're the one that's on boots on the ground, you're helping building up the company, but yet the leadership is taking the praise and like growing the company, so because we're not leadership and lower, and also like, kind of bringing it back to like the history, with Asian Americans coming over, like just working hard for the money. They're like, oh yeah, like she could probably do it because she'll do it, get it done. But, like I work in like an HR world, so it's like a lot of females. So that's why like I don't see it that way. But for a race I have, like, oh yeah, they could do it. Like I'm just like, how come you don't give it to her? Like I don't have time. So
Thank you for sharing that.
I mean, I tend to agree if the question is directed at, the female expectation, if they're in the breeding age, that they're definitely going to take the time off. And so they don't want to invest too much time or resources into a woman employee because they think like, oh, she's going to take time off, she's going to have kids, she's going to do this or that and the other thing. I mean, that's certainly true. I started my firm the same time as another gal, and we were similar age, but she took the course of being a mom, and I'm not a mom, and I definitely saw that there were different kind of opportunities, and we're in different positions now, but that's not to say it's because she's a mom or anything like that. But I definitely saw a different attitude towards the types of projects that I would be getting and the cases that I was getting versus somebody else that was more like, family focused and things like that. And certainly the male attorneys in our office, they don't get treated in a way where leadership thinks that they have to go home and cook dinner. Like they just don't. And unfortunately, I do see some of them hanging out at work, getting trashed until 2 a.m. at the office because they don't want to go home. So that is, that is an opportunity for you to get to know your leadership on a personal level that if you were a woman and a mom, you wouldn't have that same opportunity. You wouldn't have leadership characterize you in a certain way where they feel collegial with you. So, I mean, that's a lost opportunity cost for someone who elected to be a mom and fulfill that responsibility that a father may not necessarily be denied in terms of access to leadership and a pathway towards ascension. It is kind of disturbing to me that, being a woman, you almost have to choose, am I going to be a mom or do I want to be a leader? I mean, not everybody can be Sheryl Sandberg and afford like a whole team to take care of everything. I know she's saying lean in, but leaning in costs like $100K a year or something. So that's just not real. That's just not real life. But yeah, right. And then, Stephanie's right in terms of, Asians being treated as a workhorse. I mean, I've definitely been characterized as a workhorse in my firm. I mean, I definitely crank out the hours, probably same or better than most. But, in my own review on performance, I still get compared to those that don't perform as well because of really superficial reasons that have nothing to do with performance, when like by quantifiable standards, I am better. And by quantifiable, I mean dollars in the door. So, even though you can develop those defense mechanisms to fit in, they're still going to look for reasons to characterize you as the other. Maybe not consciously, but it's still going to happen because, they tend to not want to trust those that don't look like them. And they don't want to admit it because obviously it's not cute.
Zoreen, have you, experienced anything like that? Where you're kind of like expected to check off all of these boxes. And if you don't check off these boxes, you're not successful.
Yeah, definitely. It's I guess it's because of the way that I sort of grew up, because my mom's a doctor, my dad's in so there was this expectation where there was a sort of defiable, what is success? Success is you make enough money, you have to make this much amount of money, you have to be comfortable, you have to be able to do this much, and if you're not this much by this age. So there was like that whole expectation. I was thinking, when I was younger, I was like, by 25 you should have everything down pat, everything would just fall into your lap and you'd be like comfortable. And that's just how my parents had painted that picture, this beautiful picture for me. And that wasn't reality, because I'm not a fan of working in healthcare. I mean, I did study nursing, and I'm doing, like, going to be taking the NCLEX, but those were initially their sort of vision that sort of got transferred to me. And the fact that I had graduated like 2012 and I'm still not a nurse is something that has always weighed on me, because I went into music, I went into the arts and all of that stuff, which is very far removed from what was expected of me. And it was very, because you see that in a lot of like comedies, like where there's always that Filipino nurse, there's that stereotype. I'm like, but it's true, there are a lot of Filipino nurses, because the Philippines was always, I went to school in the Philippines to essentially, I studied nursing there because it was cheaper, and then I would back here, and it was so much harder than just going into college. So there was like this checklist that I sort of inadvertently started to make for myself. It wasn't about having kids or all of that stuff. It was more of like what success is, and by this time I should be able to take care of myself, take care of my family. There's that expectation of having to, like, my parents don't want to be in an elderly home, they want me to take care of. There's that whole other aspect of and a lot of that is also cultural, where I think some other cultures won't really understand the idea of taking care of your parents in that sort of respect. And that's where my experience with that comes in. Like my friend, I have friends, one of my best friends, where she recently got married, and her mom was sort of pushing that on her, having kids, and she's like, but I don't want to. I don't want that. It's I feel like it's like different for everyone. But yeah, that's my own personal experience that I'm still struggling with, trying to be okay with not being exactly where I had envisioned or wanted to be at present.
May I actually ask a question that kind of goes off what you were just saying. How many of you, Sammy included, how many of you were pushed out of the home? My brother T Murder in the background. How you doing?
Hi, everybody. Sorry, I don't want to interrupt, but
Nah, man, you're good. You're good. Jump in anytime. The water's warm, and you're always welcome. So my question is, how many of you guys were pushed out of your homes at the age of 18, or as an adult, or coming into age? And the reason why I ask that is because in my community, I don't know if Z can go off of this too. A lot of times in our households, they push us out. A lot of times they're like, "Oh, you're 18, you got to go. It's either get a job, go to school, you got to get out."
I was counting down the days to leave.
I mean, I didn't, but like the running joke in my household was, my mom literally said this: "On your 18th birthday, I'm gonna have your bags packed and you're gonna be out this house." She was saying she was joking. I took that as, on my 18th birthday, I'm not lying to you. I opened the door and looked outside, like, on my bags by the door. I was worried. And she's like, "I was only kidding. You can say it." And I was like, "Nah, I'm out. I'm out. Peace." Because for so long I had in my mind, I had to get out. So, and then I think that's kind of why a lot of times we don't take care of the elders like we should, because our elders are so busy trying to push us out. We don't think about staying to take care. Whereas on the flip side, or on the other side, a lot of times your elders are keeping you in and they take care of you, in terms of expecting the same when they are too old and they can't take care of themselves. So again, I ask, were you guys pushed out? And if so, do you find that expectation to be the same or different?
Well, I'll chime in real quick. By the way, just introduce myself. My name is Trong. Um, I'm Vietnamese. I'm second generation Vietnamese. So my parents were refugees. So they were boat people. They actually landed in Philippines where I was born, and then I came over here when I was like a year old. And the little thing about that was that I would never really felt the push to get out of the house, but I was actually left with a lot more independence in that like they kind of were always working. I was the latchkey kid, and so my job was just to hey get your education and just do good in school. Anything else, like they're just too busy and preoccupied with just working, like because that's their like thing, like just work, make the money, and your job, you do the schooling, and then you make the money, and then later on you take care of the parents. Because with us, our because how it happened was like my uncle was the first one over from Vietnam, and he would sponsor everybody over, right? And then because of that, like he had to work really hard, and then and that way like everybody else would come across. So we all has a sense of like, okay, you have to take care of family because they're going to take care of you. And the we would like fit, like I remember at my grandma's house there was like 3 or 4 uncles and aunts in one house, and just kind of made it work, and just kind of like learned to like take care of each other there. And it's kind of like just in that sense, like I grew up like, okay, like you're going to your family is where you're going to who's going to take care of you, and then you're expected to take care of them later on. And so there's no really forcing of like going out to like kick you out of the house, but there's a different sense of like responsibility in that you don't have to be responsible for yourself, but you have to be you're almost indebted to them, almost like you have to do a certain your role is to be the filial son and take care of responsibilities, as in like going to school, graduating, getting a good job, high paying job, and then taking care of like your parents later on. And being the firstborn son, it's like, okay, you got a lot on your plate. You got to set an example, which is a little bit different in my case. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I've never really had that feeling of like having to like being kicked out, like, oh, you got to go take care of yourself, like be independent. I very much kind of had my own kind of feeling like I want to be independent, because they were always like, okay, I don't want to hand out. I want to make sure that I can be independent. I want to be able to like do things on my terms, because it always seems like if they were going to give me something, they would always expect something a little bit like, hey, like, are you going to go, you can't go out because you don't have money. So like, okay, I'm going to go make my own money then. Like, I didn't want to have like any strings attached. So that was my own kind of thing. That was my own independent kind of streak, rather than I guess a cultural difference there.
Mine's kind of the opposite of Trung's. Like my parents also are refugees that came from Vietnam over. My parents were the first one here and sponsored like family over. So they had a sense of building that whole like family rapport, like taking care of each other. And for them, they came over when they were like 15, 16. So, like, what do we know when we're at that age, basically? And with them growing up here, they're more Americanized, not like really like they still have their traditions, but they're just more assimilated into like the American culture. So for them, they worked hard for their money so that when they endured all that, they didn't want their children to have to suffer. So for myself, like my parents would never want to like kick myself or my brother out because they don't want us to suffer from what they went through. So there was never a sense of like, at 18, you're out the door. It was just like, you can stay here as long as you want until you want to leave. You want to leave, not we want you to leave. And then for myself, like I'm the oldest of me and my brother. So like I have a sense of like being the oldest, I want to take care of them. And I don't think I feel like the whole like strings attached thing that Trung said, like I don't feel like I'm indebted or like I owe them anything. It's just that's something that I want to do.
That's beautiful.
Well, I mean, I don't think my parents ever pushed me to leave the house, but I think I'm definitely in the camp of I just needed to get out of there. I was like 18. I'm like, I'm going to college. I packed all my things in the car and just bye. Like never look back. In terms of my family structure, having to take care of my parents, my family is a little bit fractured and dysfunctional. So I wouldn't be a good resource to answer this particular question, given that it'd be too particular. So I don't really think it would apply to anyone. Given that my family is so fractured, I don't think there is a responsibility or a feeling of duty towards having to take care of them. And separately, I don't even think that they impose a duty onto me to take care of them either, given that our relationship is so attenuated.
I love your transparency. That's kind of like where I'm at too. Like I did not get kicked out. I left. I was God, I was kind of a nightmare towards the end of my teenage years. Not gonna lie. So, it's just I think my stepdad put it best. There were two queens in the house and it just became very tumultuous and there was just too much fighting. And then I was like, I'm over this. I'm leaving. And so I left for like a year and a half and then I came back home because I was like, I can't do this. I'm sorry. You were right. But as for like the whole taking care of, I think I can probably just say what I've witnessed. My mom is the eldest daughter. So my grandparents are gone now, but my mom has basically been in the position to take care of everyone else that's left, that my grandparents did take care of. Now it's my mom's responsibility. Just like Maria, I'm not going to get into it. There's a lot of fractured, situations within our family as well. But I will say that my mom took it upon herself to take care of who she felt needed to be taken care of. And even till today, she still feels that sense of responsibility. But as for my parents thinking that I'm, thinking or basically requiring me to take care of them, my mom kids around like that they already have a farm in the Philippines that they're going to retire to, so they don't need me. But that's just, I don't know if that's a joke or if what, but there is a farm, but the whole like not needing me thing, like that kind of hurts. But I think she's joking, of course. But that's my mom and my stepdad. As for my real dad, that's like a whole different podcast story that we can talk about at a different time. But yeah, that's my answer.
We'll definitely have you back.
I'd say it's a mix of I can relate to both Abbie, Stephanie, and Maria. Because my family's also a bit fractured, but my parents have always been like, there was never really the pressure of having to take care of them, because she would say the same thing about having something in the Philippines. She's like, I'm just gonna go move to the Philippines, I'll be fine. But she wanted to make sure that I was taking care of myself. And because my brother has autism, and so she's like, well, if there's something that happens to me, you should be able to take care of your brother, that sort of thing. And it yeah, it's more of, not that they're telling me that I have to, but it's like I kind of want to, because it's not that I feel guilty. It's just something that I would like, something nice that I would like to do for all the effort that she's sort of put in for her, like for me and stuff. So
All right. Well, what I would like to do is also piggyback off of what you guys have just said and ask this final question on my end. Is with all of that have been said, speaking about duty and speaking about taking care of those that took care of you, or feeling like you didn't have to, or that you choose to, what is your thoughts and feelings on how we make a change for the climate for today in protection of your elders now?
mm.
For those that didn't hear, Sammy just said, "Get the strap." Just thought I'd put that out there.
Oh my God, Sammy, I was just thinking retractable bats for everybody. No, I'm just kidding. That was like in my head, but I didn't want to say it out loud. So thank you for, I was like retractable bats that look like umbrellas. No, real talk. As cheesy as it sounds, I think that this division just needs to stop. I think that we all just need to understand that we are all right now in the same boat, and we need to just understand that in order for this boat not to sink, we really all just need to just stand together. So it really doesn't matter like what race or anything. If you see something, do something or say something. Okay? Like that's just plain and simple. I think that that's honestly like where we are at. Like, be observant without being so paranoid. I know that that's kind of like hypocritical because I'm definitely like paranoid, but I also am very like memorizing the things that I'm seeing just because it might help someone. Maybe if it's not me, it might help, someone that, I don't know, gets hurt, gets assaulted, gets bullied or whatever on a street that I'm literally just like staring at, right? Like just everyone just needs to help each other out. It doesn't matter like who it is anymore. We are all in this together and we just have to just stop this division.
I agree. Be vocal. I think we should be vocal. Should be able to talk about it without feeling like we're stepping on toes or walking on glass. I'm tired of having to do that. I'm tired of having to, especially in like any social situation. I just want people to understand and connect and think of it not from your own perspective, but other people's perspectives. Have a little empathy. Is I feel like where it's at.
And talking to them, that's a hard thing to do, is talking to the elders, because there's such this dichotomy. Like they're still they have that old school mentality where it's like, be quiet, just get your stuff done, like don't cause a scene, like you're not here to like make trouble, I'm just here to get on with my own life. Like being able to like have those discussions with I know like with my parents, they're super conservative, and sometimes it's hard for me, we butt heads sometimes, and it's hard for me to kind of discuss certain current events and situations with them. But just being able to meet them eye to eye as people, and meeting them eye to eye is not like just my parents, but just seeing that as people, because knowing the trauma and things that they've gone through, and understanding that the reasons why they do what they do is because of that, and understanding that, like what Zoreen said about having empathy, is just learning to take a step back and not so much like trying to make them understand you, like just trying to understand them first. Like just being okay, let's just let's level together. Let's find a common ground. Like we want to make sure that we can live our lives the best we can. We want to be able to live in a society where we don't have to constantly check over our shoulder or like worry about what we say. Be able to like speak our mind and be okay with having differing opinions. You know what I mean? And in discussions of like protecting them and telling them that this is a very real thing. That's first off, it's like, it's not sunshine and rainbows. Like, yeah, it's a very real thing. Like, it's not just something you see on the news and say, oh, it's just happening on the news. Like, it's something you should be aware of, and you should just understand the reality of your situation, and just being, not being like, super paranoid, but, just being aware and just understanding that, hey, just be cognizant of like what's happening around you, understand your normal habits, and understand that these things being brought to light, we see it, and I was talking to her about it, we see it because we're on social media, right? Most of the older generation aren't. What they do here's probably like on the radio, or like things on the news that they've seen like later on. Like we're kind of like on the cutting edge of like, oh, this is happening right now, like on Twitter, like, oh, this is trending, like this is happening here, like on Instagram, this is being updated right now. And just not like freaking them out about it, but just giving them kind of we report to them, like we're their reporters. It would be best for us to say, hey, this is what's going on right now. Let's just check in and just see how you're doing. And, hey, this is something to think about. Like just bringing up those issues and being okay with maybe not seeing eye to eye in certain things, but just being able to at least like having an understanding of, hey, this is the current events right now. Where is your head at? And are you aware of the situation that's happening right now? I think that's probably the best thing to do.
Piggyback off of what you said, like the whole awareness thing and being able to talk, like raising more awareness. Like I think what Maria said earlier about like breaking that culture where it's like, we're not here, but not here, but like in the middle, we're just kind of cruising through. Because I think with a lot of the older generation, like especially like our parents' generation, they came over here, immigrated here, and just worked hard for their money and like keep their head down so that they could just live a peaceful life because it's supposed to be, the land of the free. But I think communicating with them and making them more aware of the current events and having them being open to talking to other older generations so that they start talking about it. Because I think right now everyone's in the notion of like, okay, cool, I heard about it, not going to do anything, like I'm not going to talk to like my sister about it, I'm not going to talk to my friend about it. But I think one of the cool things that like we were just talking about it is that like my parents, like they always watch the news, like they're actually on Instagram too, but like they're aware of like the current events. And like now that they're talking about it more, like I hear her talking with like my mom talking with her sister, like it's okay to talk about it. I think what I'm trying to say is like it's okay to start talking, being more aware so that people break that culture and do something about it so that they can spread that awareness.
I don't really have anything to add. I feel like everybody already said everything. No, I mean, yeah, I agree with all of those things, like having awareness, maybe some volunteerism. I really like that idea of people taking turns and assisting the elderly walk home at night in the dark, because I mean, yeah, those streets can be mean looking. So I really like that idea. I mean, like I said, I don't know why I did all this homework thinking I needed to do homework in preparation for this, but I was reading this statistic about how since the pandemic, there have been 3,800 anti-Asian hate incidents reported to the Stop AAPI Hate organization. I thought that was like a really crazy large number. But again, I think a lot of it had to do with the rhetoric coming from our leaders in this country. I mean, it certainly didn't help anyone to call it the Kung flu. So, now everybody's associating these negative feelings with being sheltered in from coronavirus, which doesn't distinguish among ethnic backgrounds, by the way. And then just targeting it all on Asians. So, yeah. I kind of struggle with this question because like, during the BLM stuff, they tell us like you could do different things, right? One thing you can do is you can donate your time, you can protest, you can educate yourself, you can donate money, you can do all of those things, right? So, we're sheltered at home, we have more time. I spend a lot more time reading at home and stuff like that. And, I picked up like a old classic I haven't read since like I was 13 or something like that, because it was on our summer reading list. And like I reread the Malcolm X memoirs and stuff like that. And so I was like rereading the Malcolm X memoirs, and he spends a lot of time talking about how, this country is just never going to accept us, so we should just all go back to Africa and form our own nation. But then he goes back there and he experienced, and he doesn't say it in his memoir, but like you can tell he's not totally part of that culture either. And I mean, he talks about different interactions, but you can tell it's not necessarily the same either. So I don't think that's necessarily a solution. Obviously, there's no perfect solution, but the idea that really stuck with me was, okay, earlier we were talking about Abbie not feeling Filipino enough, us looking different and always feeling a sense of otherness. And then us trying to figure out what it is for us to be in this social experiment called the melting pot. And so on the one hand, I feel like, well, is anything really going to get better or different or whatever? And then on the other hand, I'm like, well, it's not if you don't try, right? So to a certain extent, we are where we are, so we have to keep trying and make the best of it. But then I can't help this really awful feeling inside that these things just keep happening, right? Like, I mean, my aunt, or I should say, she immigrated in this country in the 30 when she was in her 30s, and so like, early 90s or something like that. And I I try to like educate her on what the problems are with the social issues in this country, but it's not like she knows the history of this country. And I tell her things like, okay, civil rights, 1954, not that long ago. Watts riots, 90s, not that long ago. And all of this stuff, it just keeps happening. So to a certain extent, I just can't help feeling these things are just going to keep happening. Like, what else are we going to do, But anyways, that's all I got.
Yeah, no, yeah, you're not wrong. Like I said, it's that I had that same existential dread, sitting there of like, there's this idea of, so we all know the law of attraction, right? You think it, you put all your energy towards it, and it comes towards you. You put it out into the universe, it comes back. But like, we rarely talk about the law of expectation, the idea that we're expecting this outcome, therefore we are intent, like, subconsciously planning for it and inadvertently creating it. So whereas why don't we take that, like, we could easily take that approach, instead of those moments, because like I was having that moment of like, like, I was just like, fuck, this is never going to change, of like, but I should expect things to change, because even though things seem so like just stagnant and frustrating, and like we're hitting this brick wall of like, yo, motherfucker, see the shit that's happening every single day, like, something's got to give, and it's not going to be us. Like, the people that want change, the people that want positivity. So I mean, I was like, I personally, it was just me because it works for me, but like, I personally started like deciding like, I'm gonna start expecting that these things are going to change, and I'm gonna start planning for it.
Right now, and I want each and every one of you guys to hear me when I say this, you are that expectation. This conversation is that change. And remember earlier when I started this, when we started the podcast, I told you, for us to be the change that we wish to see, this is the change that we are creating. This is the expectations we are creating. We are the generation of change. And I firmly believe that. And any way that you are able to talk to others, educate others, whether hopefully you have that foresight to talk to the kids that are around you, change them, influence them. That is how we stop the trauma, because you guys are so right. Maria, you hit the nail on the head. 60s wasn't that long ago. 90s wasn't that long ago. Just think about this, 2000s. 99, 2000s wasn't that long ago. Everybody has their time. Everybody has their time. Except one group. And they're the most consistent. Even though we see, and I'm just going to put out there, even though we see a lot of the mass shootings and everything that happens like multiple times every year, it always seems like they always seem to be able to do this and lift up the rug and just put it underneath and keep it moving and put everybody else on us, put everything else on everybody else. I just want you to know, each and every one of you right now are that change. You are
Each
that
and every one of you
expectation.
matter.
And you matter. You are heard. You are loved. You are supported. And you are necessary. And we are here for you. And I'm only going to say this one time. And this is not going to be negative. See color. Because nobody ever looks at a blank canvas and gets inspired. See color for the beauty it brings. And expect that beauty to change the world.
That's beautiful. Last thought, and it may, like I said, again, this may be something that begets a further conversation, but I will be remiss if I don't address this because someone brought this up to me today, but about the rhetoric that gets spread around in Asian communities. We haven't talked about this yet. We can even make this a Discord topic just to see everyone's perspective on it. But like the rhetoric that gets pushed around in not just, I mean, you see it in Asian communities, but not just Asian communities, other communities as well of the vilification and the negative views towards Black people. So saying, you know, the recent thing that came out was like, hey, Black people, make sure that you speak up. You make sure you're not silent. Make sure you're doing this. Make sure you're doing the most that you can do in order to help. And you know, hearing some people feel, you know, backlash from that of like, yo, hold on, we're fighting this big large fight, like you expect this, but yet we still experience the racism, the hate, the things, you know, within those communities. How do we, again, not expecting everyone to solve this in a quick answer, but like how do we rectify that, like with us as generation and with us, you know, in different parts?
I think that we just need to stop pinpointing just like a specific color. You know what I mean? Again, it's this whole like we're all in this together thing that, as cheesy and High School Musical as that sounds, we really truly like are. Because even though a majority of what's been happening, I mean, like we can factually like look it up, you know, it's basically, you know, Black youths that are committing these crimes against Asian elders. That's not something I'm making up. That's like factual if we like looked up the different things. However, I'm not going to basically categorize like one specific group for something that someone has done. Like a lot of my Black brothers and sisters have checked on me literally daily. Like, how are you doing? Are you okay? What can I do for you? That in itself speaks volumes. But it also goes to show, because that's exactly what I did for them when they were so heavily hit with Black Lives Matter and the protests and, you know, all the things that we went through at the height of the pandemic. I think the long short answer of this is just we just need to stop again with the division and just really focus on what our end result and our end game should be. And that's just defeating hate. It doesn't matter who the hate is from, just defeat it.
I just want to say thank you to our Patreon. You guys have been phenomenal. Thank you for all your support and everything that you guys have been and done for us to help this podcast be what it is and where it is today. I would also like to take this time to say thank you to each and every one of our panelists this evening. You guys were beyond amazing, and I knew I made the right choice. And I know probably the people that are going to be like hearing this later are going to be, why didn't you ask me? And be like, well, we're just going to have a second episode. You know, so I just want to say thank you. And I also want to point out this is our last Monday of March, and we had a predominantly female cast today, and that was done on purpose. So thank you to our women for Women's Empowerment and History Month. So thank you so much for all that you guys have brought, because I want you to realize something. You are the backbone. And I'm not saying of any one specific color, race, creed, whatever. Women are the backbone. You know, and like I said this once before, I've heard this before. They say a man can make a house, but it's a woman who makes it a home. So I want to say thank you for all that you have done, that you do, and you continue to do for our communities, for our homes, and for us. Because without you, there'd be no us. So thank you for everything that you have done, and thank you for all that you have contributed this evening. And for those of you that are a part of us, please join us on our Discord. To all of our panelists, join us in our Discord. Let's reinvigorate that conversation again. If you guys would like to continue some more, thank you so much, and let's continue this conversation in our Discord. And happy birthday to Robin.
Yes, and if you would also like to continue this outside of here, feel free to hit us up on Twitter or Instagram at Have a Drinkcast, and make sure to use the hashtag HADcast. That way we can see anything y'all post. And just like before, you know, when we were the height of the BLM movements, you know, we talk about the kind of solutions, and you know, if you can't, you know, donate. If you can't go out there and donate, go out there and protest. If you can't protest, then use your voice in some way, shape, or form. There's many communities you can go on to. If you go on to washthehate.com, they have a campaign going on. It's kind of like one of the things that kind of like has been put out there, campaigns that have been put out there in order to combat the AAPI violence, as well as, there are a bunch of organizations out there. We'll probably link them in our credits if you want to take a look, and as well as in our description.
Also, please share this conversation, and don't only just share the conversation, have your own conversation on your end. You know what I'm saying? Talk to your friends, talk to your family, talk to those around you, talk to somebody you don't know, because that's only going to make change happen faster. Approach somebody, say hello, smile, whatever, but let's just try to bring unity back. We don't have to be individuals. Just because we were born alone doesn't mean we have to go through life alone. Come together, reach out and touch someone appropriately with consent. There you go. No, there you go. Everybody smiled and had a little fun now. Thank you. But I want you guys to go out there and just show love. All right. It's about that time. Let's do it.
All right. Raise your glasses. Raise your glasses. All right, kings, queens, and royals in between. I want to thank y'all again for another successful episode of the Have a Drink podcast. And we invite y'all back to sit, think, and have a drink. That's been us. Peace.
Peace.